He arrived at the theater in simple clothes, dirty shoes, and asked to play in the concert. The musicians laughed at him, but when they saw him start to play, they couldn't believe what they were seeing. The night was cold when Samuel Cardoso crossed the glass doors of the Grand Harmony Municipal Theater. His worn-out shoes squeaked against the polished marble, leaving small smudges that contrasted with the floor's impeccable shine. His gray hair was unkempt, and the stubble on his face completed the image of someone life had forgotten. The threadbare coat hung loosely on his thin frame. He held against his chest a faded violin case, covered with worn stickers from distant countries. The main lobby buzzed with activity. Elegant musicians moved about with gleaming instruments, wearing immaculate tuxedos and evening gowns. The air smelled of expensive perfume and ambition. It was the final rehearsal for the premium benefit concert, and there was a problem. They couldn't find a good violinist for the solo. My God, who let that beggar in? The shrill voice cut through the room like a knife. Samuel stopped in the middle of the lobby. Every gaze turned to him. A woman of about 30, her hair in a perfect bun, strode toward him. Her high heels clicked with authority on the floor. It was Patricia Drummond, a violinist with the Metropolitan Symphony Orchestra. "Security," she called, gesturing broadly. "There's a homeless man in here." "I came for the audition for the violin solo," Samuel said, his voice hoarse from speaking so little. Patricia stopped, blinked twice, and then burst into loud, theatrical laughter. Immediately, other musicians around them began to laugh as well. "You? An audition? Look at you." A tall man with glasses and slick-back hair approached. It was Eduardo Lins, concertmaster of a regional orchestra, and another candidate for the spot. "Patricia, I think the old man is confused," Eduardo said, prompting more laughter. "He probably came looking for the shelter down the street." "I am a violinist," Samuel repeated calmly, hugging the case to his chest. "Of course you are, dear," a third voice chimed in. Marina Vasconcelos, a 23-year-old prodigy, came closer, rolling her eyes. "And I'm the Queen of England. Listen, Grandpa, this is a top-tier concert, not a bandstand show in a town square. Someone call security before he asks for money," Patricia insisted, already grabbing her phone. "No, wait," a fourth musician appeared. It was Bernardo Fonseca, a middle-aged violinist with a prominent belly and the air of someone who took everything very seriously. Let the man speak. Could be entertaining. He smiled maliciously. "What's your name, sir?" "Samuel. Samuel Cardoso." "Samuel Cardoso?" Bernardo pretended to think. "Never heard of you. And where did you study, Samuel?" "At the street music school?" More laughter echoed through the lobby. "I studied at the Royal Academy of Music in London," Samuel answered softly. The silence that followed lasted only 2 seconds before the laughter resumed, even louder. "Oh, sure. And I studied on Mars. Tell us more, maestro." "That's offensive." Marina folded her arms. "Lying like that about a serious institution. You could be sued for that." "I'm not lying." Samuel kept his voice serene, but his fingers gripped the case more tightly. "Of course not." Patricia stepped closer, her expensive perfume invading Samuel's personal space. "And I bet that violin there is an authentic Stradivarius, isn't it?" "No, it's a Guarneri del Gesù from 1743. Samuel replied naturally. The explosion of laughter was deafening. "A Guarneri." Marina had to lean on Eduardo to keep from falling from so much laughing. "My God, he's a comedian. Do you know how much an authentic Guarneri costs, Grandpa?" Bernardo came closer. "Millions. Millions of reis." "You're being cruel." A woman's voice sounded behind them. A young production assistant with brown hair and gentle eyes watched the scene uncomfortably. "Oh, Julia. Always soft-hearted." Marina rolled her eyes. "He's clearly either mentally ill or a con artist." "He doesn't seem dangerous," Julia defended. "And Maestro Augusto said he'd listen to anyone who showed up." "Maestro Augusto is desperate," Bernardo emphasized. "But not even he is desperate enough for this." "Mr. Samuel, come with me," Julia said firmly. "I'll take you to Maestro Augusto. He decides." The Redemption of Samuel Cardoso. Part 2. Julia led Samuel down a side corridor, away from the bustle of the main lobby. The walls were lined with old photographs of the theater's historic performances. "Don't mind them, Mr. Samuel," Julia said kindly. The classical music world is very exclusionary. I know, Samuel replied with a faint smile. I've met many like them over the years. Are you really a violinist? I was. A long time ago. Julia looked at him with curiosity. There was something in those tired eyes that didn't match his shabby appearance. Why did you stop? Samuel fell silent for a moment, his fingers stroking the violin case. I lost the reasons to play, he said at last. But I think I found a new one. Before Julia could ask more, they reached the door of the main rehearsal room. Voices were arguing heatedly on the other side. The concert is the day after tomorrow, Augusto. The day after tomorrow. And we don't have a soloist. Julia knocked lightly on the door. Come in, a deep, weary voice replied. Julia opened the door and entered, followed by Samuel. The rehearsal room was spacious, with a high ceiling and perfect acoustics. A grand piano occupied one corner, and music stands were scattered about. In the center of the room, a man of about 60 massaged his temples with an exhausted expression. It was Maestro Augusto Belmonte, with wavy white hair and gold-rimmed glasses. Beside him, a younger man gesticulated frantically. Maestro, I brought someone for the audition, Julia announced. The young man, Ricardo Tavares, the concert's production director, whirled around. His eyes widened when he saw Samuel. Is this a joke? Ricardo nearly shouted. Julia, have you lost your mind? You said the maestro would hear anyone. Julia answered firmly. Anyone qualified. Look at the state of this man. Augusto Belmonte raised his hand for silence. He watched Samuel closely, his experienced eyes taking in every detail. What is your name? The maestro asked, his calm voice contrasting with Ricardo's agitation. Samuel Cardoso, maestro. Augusto frowned slightly, as if the name sounded vaguely familiar, but he couldn't place the memory. And you play the violin, Samuel? I do, sir. For how long? I started at 7. I played professionally for 40 years. Ricardo let out a sarcastic laugh. 40 years? Sure. And where exactly did you play in those glorious 40 years? Samuel kept his eyes on Maestro Augusto, ignoring Ricardo's sarcasm. I played in the London Philharmonic from 1962 to 1968. I was a guest soloist in several concerts across Europe and the Americas. This is ridiculous. Ricardo exploded. Maestro, we're not going to waste time with this. Quiet, Ricardo, Augusto interrupted, still observing Samuel intently. 1962 to 1968, you said? Yes, sir. And why did you stop? The question hung in the air. Samuel looked away for the first time, his fingers tightening around the case. Personal reasons, maestro. How convenient. Ricardo crossed his arms. He can't prove a word of what he's saying. I can prove it by playing, Samuel said simply. Augusto studied the man before him. There was something there, a bearing, a dignity even beneath the rags, that intrigued the maestro. Very well. Play something for me. Maestro, Ricardo protested. This is a waste of time. Look at him. Ricardo, either be quiet or leave the room, Augusto said firmly. This is my rehearsal, my concert, my decision. Ricardo backed off, muttering something inaudible, but stayed, arms crossed, face full of disdain. Samuel walked to the center of the room. His movements were slow, but there was a certain grace to them, as if his body remembered an old choreography. He set the case on the floor and knelt to open it. The clasps were rusty and resisted a bit. Even the case is a joke, Ricardo muttered to Julia, who shot him a withering look. When Samuel finally opened the case, a sudden hush fell over the room. Even under dust and time, it was impossible not to recognize the beauty of the instrument resting there. The violin was magnificent. The wood had a deep amber hue, with varnish that seemed to catch and reflect the light almost magically. The curves were perfect, smooth. Augusto took a step forward, eyes wide. That instrument, he began, his voice breaking. Samuel lifted the violin from the case with reverent delicacy. His hands trembled, but not from weakness. It was the emotion of one reuniting with an old love. Is it authentic? Augusto asked in a whisper. Guarneri del Gesù, 1743. Samuel confirmed. It belonged to my grandfather. He left it to me when he passed. Ricardo still tried to cling to his skepticism, but even he seemed shaken by the sight of the instrument. Samuel didn't respond. He picked up the bow, checked the hair, made a slight adjustment to the pegs. His movements were automatic, born of decades of practice. "What would you like me to play, maestro?" he asked, setting the violin beneath his chin. Augusto thought for a moment. "Do you know Bach's Chaconne?" Samuel nodded slightly. It was one of the most difficult pieces in the solo violin repertoire. Technically devastating, emotionally profound. "An interesting choice," Samuel said, and for the first time, a small smile touched his lips. He closed his eyes, breathed in, and began. The first note filled the room like a ray of light piercing darkness. Impossible. Simply impossible that such a sound could come from that man, from those trembling hands. But it did. Ricardo froze, his mouth falling slightly open. Julia brought her hands to her chest, eyes instantly brimming. Augusto Belmonte slowly sat in a nearby chair, as if his legs could no longer support him. Samuel's fingers danced along the fingerboard with surgical precision. There was no hesitation, no error. Every note a perfect crystal, every phrase a prayer. Bach's Chaconne is not just music. It's a journey through the human soul, pain, loss, hope, redemption. And Samuel wasn't merely playing the notes. He was living each one. Tears slid silently down Julia's face. Ricardo had moved closer, his sarcasm forgotten, completely absorbed by the music. Augusto recognized it immediately. It wasn't only technique, though the technique was flawless. It was something more. It was the maturity of one who had lived, suffered, lost. The double stops were executed with a facility that seemed to defy physics. The fast passages flowed like water. The sustained notes vibrated with an emotion that stole the breath from one's lungs. Samuel was transported. His eyes remained closed, but his face expressed everything: concentration, pain, beauty. It was as if he were having an intimate conversation with the instrument. The piece built, layer upon layer of complexity and emotion. Samuel navigated it like an experienced captain in stormy seas. And then, the climax. The notes rose, intense, urgent, desperate, and suddenly the resolution. Peace. The silence that followed was profound. Samuel kept the bow poised above the strings for a moment, as if reluctant to break the spell. Then slowly, he lowered the violin. When he opened his eyes, he saw three people staring at him with expressions of absolute shock. The redemption of Samuel Cardoso. Part 3. Augusto Belmonte was the first to move. He rose slowly from the chair, his hands trembling slightly. He walked up to Samuel, eyes shining with an emotion he rarely showed. "My God," was all he could say at first. "Good Lord." Ricardo was pale, completely still. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Julia was openly crying now, not bothering to hide her tears. "Who are you?" Augusto asked, his voice laden with reverence. "Who are you really?" Samuel lowered the violin, holding it against his chest. His own breathing was uneven, as if he'd run a long distance. "I told you, maestro." "Samuel Cardoso." "Samuel Cardoso." Augusto repeated the name slowly, searching his memory. "Samuel, wait. Wait." The maestro ran to his leather case in the corner of the room. He rummaged frantically through papers and old scores. Julia and Ricardo watched, confused. I knew that name. I knew it," Augusto exclaimed as he searched. "Where is it? Where?" He pulled out an old book, hard-covered with yellowed pages. It was an encyclopedia of classical musicians, a 1970 edition. Augusto flipped rapidly until he found what he sought. His fingers stopped on a page, and he read aloud. Samuel Cardoso, Brazilian violin prodigy, born in 1944. Studied at the Royal Academy of Music in London. His voice faltered. He looked at Samuel, then at the book, then at Samuel again. Considered one of the most promising violinists of his generation. Performed with the London Philharmonic. International tours acclaimed. Ricardo hurried over, yanking the book from Augusto's hands to see for himself. His eyes scanned the words with growing disbelief. "This can't be," Ricardo murmured. "This can't be the same person." "Keep reading," Samuel said quietly. Augusto took the book back and continued. Last recorded performance in 1968 at Carnegie Hall, New York. Disappeared from the musical scene soon after. Reasons unknown. A heavy silence filled the room. Julia looked at Samuel with a mixture of admiration and sadness. "You really are him," Augusto said, not as a question, but as a statement. "The Samuel Cardoso. The legend." "I was," Samuel corrected gently. "A long time ago." "But how?" Ricardo finally found his voice. "How did you end up like this?" It was an insensitive question, but curiosity overcame decorum. Samuel didn't seem offended. He stroked the violin tenderly. "Life happened," he said simply. "That's not an answer." Augusto stepped closer. "Samuel, you were one of the greatest. You played the most prestigious stages in the world. What happened?" Samuel walked to a chair and sat slowly, as if the weight of memory were physical. He looked at the violin in his hands. "Do you truly want to know?" "Yes," Augusto said firmly. "We do." Samuel took a deep breath. His eyes drifted to some distant point, some distant time. "I married in 1967. Her name was Helena. She was a pianist. We met in London. She was," his voice caught, "she was the most incredible person I ever met." Julia sat in a nearby chair, giving him her full attention. Even Ricardo now seemed genuinely interested. "We were married that June. It was the happiest day of my life. We had plans, so many plans. We would form a duo, travel together, play together." "What happened?" Julia asked gently. "She became pregnant in October. We were overjoyed. I had a tour scheduled for 1968, but I was going to cancel everything to be with her and the baby." Samuel paused for a long moment. His hands trembled now, and not from anxiety. "March 1968. I was in New York, at Carnegie Hall. It was supposed to be my last performance, before returning to London. Helena was 7 months pregnant." He shut his eyes tightly. "There were complications. The baby, and then she." His voice broke completely. Julia raised a hand to her mouth, fresh tears running down her face. Augusto bowed his head in respect. "I got the news an hour before going on stage. My wife and my son both gone. And I was on the other side of the ocean." "My God," Ricardo whispered. "Even so, I went on stage that night. I don't know why. I suppose I was in shock. I gave the best performance of my life. And it was the last." Samuel opened his eyes, looking directly at the violin. "After that, I couldn't play anymore. Every note reminded me of her. Every melody was a stab. So I stopped. I simply stopped." "And what did you do all these years?" Augusto asked softly. "I survived. Barely. I lost everything gradually. The money, the home, the contacts. I sank into depression, into drink. I sold everything I had, except the violin. That I could never sell." He caressed the instrument with painful tenderness. "It was the only thing that still connected me to who I had been, to who we had been together. Helena loved it when I played." "Why come back now?" Julia asked, wiping her tears. "After so long?" Samuel gave a faint smile, one filled with both sadness and hope. "Because I finally understood something. Helena would not have wanted me to spend the rest of my life in mourning. She loved music because music brought people joy." He looked at each of them. "I spent 57 years punishing myself, believing I didn't deserve happiness, that I didn't deserve to play. But a few days ago, I saw a child on the street." "A child?" Ricardo asked. "She had a cheap little toy violin. She was trying to play, but didn't know how. Her parents didn't have money for lessons, and I saw at her eyes." Samuel paused, moved. "I saw the same passion I had as a child, the same hunger for music, and I realized I was being selfish, keeping all this knowledge, all this experience, to myself. So you decided to come back," Augusto concluded. "I decided to try. I don't know if I'm still good enough. I don't know if I deserve to be on a stage again, but I know I have to try." Augusto stepped close and placed both hands on Samuel's shoulders. "Good enough? Samuel, you are extraordinary. What I just heard it was transcendent." "The maestro is right," Ricardo admitted, his voice still trembling with emotion. I need to apologize for the things I thought, the things I assumed." "No need," Samuel said gently. "I understand. My appearance doesn't inspire confidence. Your appearance doesn't matter, Julia exclaimed. What matters is your heart, your soul, your music. Samuel looked at the young woman with affection. You were the only one who defended me out there. Thank you for that. I only did what was right, Julia replied, blushing slightly. Augusto returned to his case and took out a score. This is the concert program. Augusto showed the score. Overture with the full orchestra, then the violin solo in Beethoven's Concerto in D major. Samuel took the score reverently. His eyes scanned the notes, and for the first time in decades, he felt that old excitement rise in his chest. Beethoven, he murmured. I've always loved Beethoven. Can you do it? Augusto asked. I know it's only 2 days, but I've played this concerto dozens of times. Samuel interrupted gently. I still know it by heart. He closed his eyes and began humming the main melody, his fingers moving in the air as if already playing. It was perfect. Every note, every pause, exactly where it should be. Ricardo and Julia exchanged impressed looks. Augusto simply smiled, tears in his eyes. Then it settled, the maestro declared. You will be our soloist. Wait, Samuel hesitated. And the others? The candidates who were out there? Samuel, Augusto said firmly. You just played Bach in a way I haven't heard in 50 years of career. There is no comparison. Let me do something, Samuel insisted. Let me play for them too. So they see. So they understand. I don't want to make enemies. Augusto considered a moment, then nodded. Very well. If that's what you want. Ricardo, call everyone to the rehearsal room. Everyone in the building. I want them all to see this. The Redemption of Samuel Cardoso, Part 4. Ricardo hurried out. Julia stayed by Samuel's side, an encouraging smile on her face. It's going to be all right, she said softly. I hope so, Samuel replied, but there was uncertainty in his voice. In the next few minutes, the corridor filled with footsteps and chatter. The door opened and Patricia came in first, her expression still disdainful. What is this, Augusto? We're busy rehearsing, she complained. Eduardo, Marina, and Bernardo followed close behind, along with other orchestra musicians. Everyone stopped when they saw Samuel still holding the violin. I can't believe we're wasting time on this, Marina muttered. Silence, Augusto ordered in a voice that allowed no argument. Everyone find a place to sit or stand. Now, the maestro's tone was so serious that even the skeptics obeyed. Soon about 20 people were in the room, watching Samuel with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. What I'm about to show you, Augusto began, is something extraordinary. But first, I want you to listen without interruptions. Maestro, with all due respect, Eduardo began. We've heard real musicians. We don't need to, I said. Silence. Augusto thundered, making everyone jump. One more word, and you're out of this theater. Understood? Eduardo swallowed hard and nodded, red with embarrassment. Augusto turned to Samuel and gave an encouraging gesture. When you're ready. Samuel took a deep breath. All those people watching him, judging him, doubting him. It was like being back in the old days, but without the confidence he'd had then. His hands shook as he set the violin. For a terrible moment, he thought he wouldn't manage it, that the pressure would be too much. Then his eyes found Julia's. She was smiling at him with such faith, such certainty, that something inside him calmed. He closed his eyes and began to play. This time, he chose something different. Not Bach, but Massenet's Meditation. A shorter piece, more direct to the heart. The first note floated through the room like a sigh. Then the second, and the third, each more beautiful than the last. Patricia, who had stood with folded arms and a bored expression, felt her arms slowly drop. Her eyes widened. Eduardo leaned forward as if pulled by an invisible thread. His mouth opened in pure shock. Marina, the young prodigy who had mocked so much, raised her hands to her face. Tears began to stream between her fingers. Bernardo simply froze, completely paralyzed by the beauty of what he was hearing. Samuel's music wasn't merely technically perfect. It was pure soul turned into sound. Every note carried decades of pain, of love, of loss, of hope. The orchestra musicians, seasoned professionals who had heard thousands of performances, were struck dumb with admiration. Some cried openly. Others just stared, transfixed. The meditation is a piece about prayer, about seeking the divine. And Samuel played as if he were truly in prayer, conversing with something greater than himself. The musical phrases flowed into one another effortlessly. The dynamics were perfect, moments of intimate whisper followed by bursts of passion. When the last note faded into the air, no one moved. The silence was absolute, sacred. Then Patricia began to cry. Not delicate tears, but deep, convulsive sobs. Eduardo had his face in his hands, shoulders shaking. Marina fell to her knees, unable to remain standing. Bernardo just kept shaking his head, as if he couldn't process what he had just heard. One of the orchestra's violinists, a gray-haired man named Alberto, was the first to speak. In 40 years playing professionally, I've never heard anything like it. It's impossible, a cellist murmured. Simply impossible. Patricia staggered toward Samuel as if in a daze. Her eyes were red and swollen. I'm sorry, she managed between sobs. God, I'm so sorry. The things I said. It's all right, Samuel said gently. It is not all right. Patricia nearly shouted. I was horrible. Cruel. And you are. She couldn't finish, covering her face with her hands again. Eduardo also came closer, visibly shaken. Mr. Cardoso, I have no words for how ashamed I am. I judged you, I mocked you, and you are 1,000 times the musician I will ever be. You're young, Samuel said, and talented. I heard you talking earlier. First violin in a regional orchestra is an achievement. But compared to you, don't compare yourself to me. Samuel cut in firmly. Compare yourself only to who you were yesterday. That's how you grow. Marina approached still on her knees, crawling across the floor. It was a surreal image, the impeccably dressed young prodigy kneeling before the shabby old man. Forgive me, she whispered. Please forgive me. Samuel knelt as well, coming to her level. There's nothing to forgive. You protect your art, your space. I understand that. No, Marina shook her head vehemently. It wasn't about protecting anything. It was about ego. About feeling superior. And now, she looked at him with a mix of admiration and shame. Now I know nothing. Absolutely nothing. Samuel helped Marina to her feet, with gentle hands. She took his hand, trembling, still unable to stop crying. You do know, Samuel said firmly. You have talent, technique, youth. You have everything ahead of you. But I'll never play like you, Marina replied, voice breaking. You don't need to play like me. You need to play like you. Every musician has their own voice. Mine took 60 years and a lot of pain to form. Bernardo came closer, his eyes also red. He held out his hand formally to Samuel. Mr. Cardoso, I'm Bernardo Fonseca, and I'm a complete idiot. Samuel shook his hand with a gentle smile. A pleasure, Bernardo. And no, you're not an idiot. Just human. I treated you like trash, Bernardo said, his voice heavy with remorse. I made cruel jokes about your appearance, your situation, and I forgave you before you even asked, Samuel interrupted. Holding a grudge would only poison my own soul. Alberto, the gray-haired violinist, made his way through the others. His eyes shone with a different light. Not just admiration, but recognition. I knew that sound, Alberto said slowly. 1966. Royal Albert Hall. I was a student in the audience. Samuel looked at him in surprise. You were there? In the last row, the cheapest seat I could afford. But I heard every note as if beside you. It changed my life. It was because of that performance I decided to become a professional musician. Emotion filled Alberto's voice. He held out his trembling hands. You were my hero, my idol. And then you disappeared. I looked for you for years. I read everything I could find, but it was as if you had been erased from history. I wanted to be erased, Samuel admitted softly. I thought I deserved to disappear. But you came back, Alberto smiled through tears. Thank God, you came back. Augusto watched everything with deep satisfaction. Julia stood by him, also crying with emotion. See what music does, the maestro said softly to her. It unites people. Tears down walls. Transforms hearts. It's beautiful, Julia agreed, wiping her tears. Patricia took a deep breath, trying to pull herself together. She looked at Samuel with a mix of admiration and resolve. Mr. Cardoso, The solo spot is obviously yours. But may I ask a favor? Of course, Samuel replied. After the concert, could you give me some lessons? I'll pay whatever it takes. I just want to learn, even a fraction of what you know. Samuel smiled warmly. You don't need to pay me anything. It would be an honor to share what I know. Eduardo also approached, more hesitant. I would also very much like to learn from you. If you'll accept me after everything I said. Of course I will, Samuel replied without hesitation. Marina wiped her face with the back of her hand, trying to regain some composure. I want as well. Please. I need to understand how you put so much soul into every note. The soul is already in you, Samuel said gently. You just need to learn to let it out without fear. Bernardo cleared his throat, clearly too moved to speak normally. I think I speak for all of us when I say it would be an honor to play with you in this concert, to share a stage with a living legend. A forgotten legend, Samuel corrected with a sad smile. Forgotten, but not lost, Alberto said. And now found again. The world needs to hear you. Augusto clapped his hands to get everyone's attention. Very well. Now that everyone understands who our soloist is, let's get to work. We have 2 days to prepare this concert, and it has to be perfect. Maestro, Samuel raised his hand timidly. There's a problem. Everyone looked at him with concern. I don't have proper clothes. I don't have money to rent a tuxedo to. Already taken care of, Ricardo cut in, grabbing his phone. I'll have the best clothes in the city brought over. Suit, shoes, everything you need. And he needs a place to stay as well, Julia added. He can't sleep on the street. You can stay at my apartment, Alberto offered immediately. I have a spare guest room. And you need to eat properly, Patricia said. You're too thin. I'll arrange proper meals. Samuel looked around, utterly overwhelmed by the transformation. Minutes ago, these same people had ridiculed him. Now they treated him like royalty. I don't know what to say. His voice broke with emotion. Don't say anything, Eduardo smiled. Just let us help. It's the least we can do after everything. Augusto came to Samuel and placed a hand on his shoulder. Samuel, you're not alone now. We're family here. And family takes care of one another. Samuel felt something break inside him. All the defenses he had built over decades of solitude, all the walls around his heart, they all crumbled at once. He began to cry. Not delicate tears, but deep sobs from a very deep place. Tears of relief, of gratitude, of release. Julia was the first to hug him, followed by Patricia, then Eduardo, Marina, Bernardo. Soon the entire orchestra was in one big group embrace, everyone crying together. Thank you, Samuel managed between sobs. Thank you. Thank you. The Redemption of Samuel Cardoso, Part 5. Well, Augusto said after a few minutes, wiping his own eyes. Enough drama for today. We have a concert to prepare. Samuel, are you ready to rehearse with the orchestra? Samuel nodded, still trembling with emotion, but with a genuine smile on his face for the first time in decades. I'm ready, maestro. Excellent. Everyone to your places. Let's start with the first movement of Beethoven's Concerto in D major. The musicians rushed to get their instruments and take their positions. There was a different energy in the air now, not just professionalism, but true enthusiasm. Samuel stood in the center, facing Augusto. The maestro stepped onto his podium and raised the baton. Ready? Augusto looked around. And 1, 2, 3. The orchestra began the introduction. It was masterful, strings, winds, percussion, all working in perfect harmony. The sound filled the room, ricocheting off the perfectly tuned walls. Then came Samuel's cue. He raised the violin, closed his eyes, and entered. It was magical. Samuel's violin intertwined with the orchestra as if they were a single entity. There was no separation between soloist and accompaniment. It was a musical conversation, a dialogue between friends. Augusto conducted with eyes shining with pure joy. He had conducted hundreds of concerts, but never with a soloist like this. Every gesture of his was answered perfectly by Samuel. The musicians around them played with renewed inspiration. Samuel's presence elevated them, made each one play better than they normally could. Patricia, seated among the second violins, played with tears streaming down her face. Eduardo and the violas couldn't stop smiling. The first movement ended with a powerful crescendo. Augusto lowered the baton, and there was a moment of absolute silence. Then the room erupted in applause. It wasn't protocol to applaud during rehearsals, but no one could help it. Extraordinary, Augusto exclaimed. Simply extraordinary. If we play like this at the concert, it will be historic. Ricardo burst through the door, phone still in hand. Everyone, he called out. You won't believe it. What is it? Augusto asked. I just called some press contacts. I casually mentioned we had a special soloist for the concert. And Ricardo paused for effect. The arts reporter from the city's main paper wants to do a feature. And not just that, the regional TV network wants to broadcast the concert live. Exclamations of surprise filled the room. Broadcast live? Augusto repeated, incredulous. They never do that for classical concerts. Well, they are now. Ricardo was euphoric. When I mentioned the name Samuel Cardoso, the producer went crazy. Apparently, she remembers him from the 60s. Samuel went pale. Television? I don't know if I'm ready for. You're more than ready. Julia squeezed his hand encouragingly. The world needs to see this. Needs to see you. Augusto stepped close and looked Samuel straight in the eyes. Samuel, you just played perfectly after only a few minutes of rehearsal. You have this. Pressure doesn't break you, it strengthens you. He's right, Marina said. You were made for the big stages. Always were. Samuel took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. All right, he agreed at last. Let's do it. The room erupted in applause again. My story isn't important, Samuel said modestly. The music is what matters. Your story, I asked the music, Alberto corrected. Every note you play carries your past, your pain, your journey. Bernardo cleared his throat to get attention. Mr. Cardoso, may I make a suggestion? Of course, Bernardo. After the concert, have you considered teaching regularly? Not just us, but young students? There's so much wisdom in you that can't be wasted. Samuel was quiet for a moment, thinking. You know, I met a little girl a few days ago. She had a toy violin and a huge passion, but no means to study. Exactly, Bernardo said, excited. Imagine how many children like her are out there. Kids with talent but no opportunities. An idea began to form in Samuel's mind. He could see it in his imagination. A place where children from all backgrounds could learn music for free. A school, he murmured. What? Julia asked. A music school, Samuel said louder, eyes shining. For underprivileged children. Where talent matters more than money. Augusto clapped enthusiastically. Yes, that's perfect. And I know people. I have contacts who could help fund something like that. I'd help too, Patricia offered. I could teach music theory. And I could teach basic technique, Eduardo added. We'd all help, Marina said, looking around for confirmation. Heads nodded all across the room. Samuel felt his chest tighten with emotion. Suddenly everything made sense. All the suffering, all the pain, all the lonely journey. It all had a purpose. Helena would like this, he said softly. She always wanted music to reach everyone, not just the privileged. Then we'll do it in her honor, Augusto said firmly. The Helena Cardoso School of Music. What do you think? Samuel couldn't answer. The tears returned, but this time they were pure joy. Julia hugged him again, and soon others joined. All right. Augusto eventually separated everyone. Now let's work. We have a lot to rehearse and little time. The next hours were intense. They worked through each movement of the concerto, adjusting dynamics, syncing entrances, polishing every musical phrase. Samuel was in his element. His suggestions were always precise, always musically intelligent. He corrected gently when someone erred, praised generously when they succeeded. During a break, Marina approached with her violin. Mr. Cardoso, could you take a look at my vibrato? I know it's wrong, but I don't know how to fix it. Samuel took her violin and demonstrated. See, the movement comes from the wrist, not the fingers. Like this, he showed in slow motion. Do you feel the difference in the sound? Marina tried to imitate him, and gradually began to improve. Incredible, she exclaimed. In 5 minutes you taught me more than my teacher in 6 months. Eduardo also used the break to ask for posture tips. Bernardo for expressiveness, Patricia for bow control. Samuel helped each one with endless patience, clearly happy to share knowledge. "You're a born teacher," Julia observed, bringing him a glass of water. "I've never taught before," Samuel admitted. "But I like this. I like seeing people improve, grow." "Then the music school really is your destiny," Julia smiled. The rehearsal went on late into the night. When they finally finished, it was past 11. Everyone was exhausted, but also energized. "Tomorrow we're back at 9 in the morning, Augusto announced. "Full dress rehearsal, costumes and all. I want us absolutely ready." The musicians began packing up. Alberto came over to Samuel. "Shall we? My apartment isn't far. You need a good night's sleep." "Wait." Ricardo appeared holding several bags. The clothes arrived. Full tux, shoes, tie, everything top quality. He handed the bags to Samuel, who took them reverently. It had been decades since he'd had new clothes. "I don't know how to thank you," Samuel said, voice breaking. "By playing wonderfully tomorrow," Ricardo replied with a smile. Patricia came over with a thermal bag. "Here's food for today and tomorrow. Sandwiches, fruit juices. Nothing heavy, but nutritious." "You're all so kind." Samuel could barely process so much kindness at once. Samuel and Alberto left the theater together. The night was cold and starry. Samuel carried his violin, the clothing bags, and the food. "You know," Alberto said as they walked, "when I was young, I dreamed of playing like you. I practiced 8, 10 hours a day. And did you get where you wanted? I reached a good place. I'm a competent violinist in a good orchestra, but I was never extraordinary like you." Alberto paused. "And that's okay. I learned I don't need to be there. Best to love what I do. Music gives me joy every day." "That's enough." "That's profound wisdom," Samuel said with admiration. They arrived at a modest but well-kept building. Alberto lived on the 3rd floor. The apartment was cozy, full of shelves with scores and classical CDs. "The bathroom's there," Alberto pointed. "Clean towels are in the cabinet. Take a hot shower. It'll help you relax." "I don't even know when I last had a proper hot shower," Samuel confessed. Samuel put his things in the room and went to the bathroom. The hot water falling on his body was like a miracle. Decades of grime, shame, pain, being washed away. He cried in the shower. He cried for all he had lost. He cried for all he was getting back. He cried with gratitude, relief, hope. When he came out, he felt like a new person. He put on the clean clothes Alberto had left, simple but comfortable pajamas. Alberto had prepared tea and some of the sandwiches Patricia had sent. They sat at the kitchen table. "Tell me more about Helena," Alberto asked gently. "If you want, of course." Samuel smiled sadly, but without bitterness. She was petite, black wavy hair, green eyes that seemed to see through your soul. She laughed easily. She played piano as if conversing with the instrument. "How did you meet?" "At a concert in London. She was playing a Chopin solo. I was mesmerized. After the performance, I went to congratulate her." Samuel took the teacup, the steam curling upward. She looked at me and said, "You play the violin, don't you?" I asked how she knew. She answered, "Your fingers have string calluses, and you move like someone who is always listening to music." Love at first sight? Something like that. We started playing together, violin-piano duets. The musical connection was perfect. And soon we discovered the personal connection was as well. They talked for another hour, about music, life, loss, and new beginnings. When Samuel finally went to sleep, he felt more at peace than he had in years. The bed was soft. The sheets smelled of lavender. Through the window, he could see the city lights twinkling in the night. He took the violin and softly played a lullaby, the same one he had planned to play for Gabriel when he was born. Now he played it for the memory of his son, and for the hope of all the children he would still help. When he finally fell asleep, it was without nightmares for the first time in years. The Redemption of Samuel Cardoso. Part 6 morning came with golden light flooding the room. Samuel woke at 8, surprisingly calm. It was as if the crying and praying the night before had released all his anxiety. Alberto was already up, making breakfast. "Good morning. Sleep well." "Better than I can remember," Samuel admitted. "Great. Eat well. You'll need energy today. After breakfast, Samuel tried on the new tux. He dressed carefully, adjusting each piece. When he looked in the mirror, he barely recognized himself. The man in the reflection was elegant, dignified. His gray hair was clean and combed. His beard had been trimmed. The tux fit him perfectly. "It's you," Alberto said from behind him. "The real you coming back." They reached the theater at 8:40. The lobby was even busier than the day before. TV crews were setting up cameras, journalists with recorders, photographers adjusting equipment. "My God," Samuel murmured, stopping at the entrance. "I wasn't expecting all this." "You're a legend," Alberto reminded him. "People want to see the impossible happen." Julia ran to them as soon as she saw them. "Mr. Samuel, what a transformation. You're unrecognizable." "For the better, I hope," Samuel joked shyly. "Much better. Come. The makeup artist wants to see you before rehearsal. And there's a journalist who wants a quick interview." Samuel was guided through the corridors. Musicians who passed by stopped to greet him, some asking for autographs. In the makeup room, a woman named Carla worked quickly on his face. "Just a light touch," she explained, "so the cameras don't wash out your features." While Carla worked, Ricardo rushed in. "Samuel, the reporter Monica Ferreira is here. She covered classical music in the 60s, remembers you. She wants 5 minutes for an interview before rehearsal." Monica Ferreira was a woman of about 70, short white hair and bright eyes. "Mr. Cardoso," she said, moved. "I can't believe I'm seeing you again. I covered your last concert in London in 1967. "Really?" Samuel was surprised. "It was one of the best performances I've ever witnessed. When you disappeared, we tried to find out what happened, but it was as if you had been erased from existence." Monica turned on the recorder. "Can you tell me why? What happened?" Samuel told his story again. Monica listened with tears in her eyes, occasionally taking notes. "And now you're coming back," she said, "after more than 50 years. What changed?" "I realized I was being selfish," Samuel answered honestly, "keeping all my knowledge, all my experience, out of pain and wounded pride." "And what's your plan?" "We want to create a school," Samuel said, eyes shining. "The Helena Cardoso School of Music, in honor of my wife. 4 underprivileged children who have talent but no means." Monica smiled broadly. "That's wonderful. Can I do a special feature on it? Help spread the word, raise donations?" "That would be incredible," Samuel replied gratefully. Then Ricardo appeared again. "Sorry to interrupt, but Maestro Augusto is calling. Time for the dress rehearsal." Samuel went to the main rehearsal room. The entire orchestra was there, all impeccably dressed. Cameras were positioned at various angles. "Good morning, everyone," Augusto greeted. "Today is our full dress rehearsal. We'll treat it like the real performance. Samuel, ready?" "Ready, Maestro." Augusto raised the baton. "And begin." The orchestral introduction filled the space. When Samuel's entry came, he played with even more confidence than the day before. It was transcendent. Patricia, playing in the strings, felt shivers run through her body. Eduardo in the violas played with tears in his eyes. Marina could barely focus on her own part, so mesmerized was she by Samuel's solo. The cameras captured everything: the rapture on the musicians' faces, Samuel's virtuosity, Augusto's passionate conducting. When they finished, there was a reverent silence. Then the sound technicians, the camera operators, the assistants, everyone erupted into spontaneous applause. That was Augusto searched for the words. "I have no words. I simply don't." They rehearsed for another 3 hours, polishing every detail. Samuel worked tirelessly, always focused on improving. During a break, Marina approached. "Mr. Cardoso, may I ask something personal?" "Of course, Marina. How do you handle pressure?" "I get so nervous before important performances that I sometimes miss simple notes." Samuel thought a moment. "Do you know why we get nervous?" "Fear of mistakes." "Fear of others' judgment," Samuel corrected. "We want to be perfect because we fear criticism. But here's the secret. You're not playing to impress anyone." "I'm not." "No. You're playing to share something beautiful, to touch people's hearts. When you shift the focus from 'will they like me?' to 'can I touch someone's heart?' the nerves ease." Marina absorbed the words. I never thought of it that way. The rehearsal continued until late afternoon. When they finished, everyone was exhausted but satisfied. Tomorrow at 5 in the afternoon, Augusto announced. Be here by 3 for final prep. We're going to make history, everyone. Underscore, 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 underscore. The day of the concert finally arrived. Samuel woke early, with a mix of nerves and excitement. It was the day that would define his return. Alberto prepared a light breakfast. Don't eat too much, he advised. You'll want to be comfortable on stage. Samuel practiced for an hour, warming his fingers, mentally revisiting the hardest passages. But his mind was calm. He was ready. At 2 in the afternoon, his phone began to ping with messages of support. Julia, Patricia, Eduardo, Marina, all sending encouragement. At 3, Samuel and Alberto arrived at the theater. The bustle was intense. Crowds outside, people trying for last-minute tickets, fans holding signs with his name. Look at this, Alberto murmured. You're a phenomenon. Backstage, Samuel was received like a celebrity. Musicians greeted him. Producers checked final details. TV cameras made last tests. In his dressing room, Samuel was alone for a few minutes. He looked in the mirror, at the elegant man staring back. It was hard to believe that just 3 days earlier he had been an invisible beggar. Someone knocked on the door. Come in. It was Patricia, Eduardo, Marina, and Bernardo, all already dressed for the concert. We came to do one last energy circle, Marina said. They formed a circle, holding hands. The moment was solemn, almost spiritual. For Helena, Patricia said. For Gabriel, Eduardo added. For all the children we're going to help, Marina continued. And for you, Mr. Samuel, Bernardo concluded. For having the courage to return. Samuel squeezed the hands beside him, fighting not to cry. Thank you, he managed. For everything. 15 minutes before the concert, Julia came to get him. It's time. The theater is packed. 5,000 inside, 1,000 outside watching on big screens. The cameras are ready. The whole country is waiting. Samuel took a deep breath. I'm ready. Julia led him through the corridors to the wings. Through the curtains, he could hear the immense murmur of the audience. It was like an ocean of voices, all waiting for him. The orchestra was already in place. Augusto checked final details. When he saw Samuel, he smiled and waved. The house lights began to dim. The murmur gradually faded. A presenter stepped onto the stage. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to something truly extraordinary. Tonight we will witness the return of a living legend. The voice echoed through the vast theater. Samuel Cardoso, one of the greatest violinists of his generation, disappeared for more than 50 years after a devastating personal tragedy. He lived on the streets. He was forgotten by the world. But music never forgot him. Emotional murmurs rippled through the audience. And today he returns. Not for glory, not for fame, but to share his gift and create a legacy that will change lives. Ladies and gentlemen, Samuel Cardoso. The theater erupted in thunderous applause before he even appeared. Samuel drew one last deep breath. He thought of Helena, of Gabriel, of Jose, of Sophia, the girl with the toy violin. He thought of all those he would still help, and he walked onto the stage. The light hit him like an embrace. 5,000 people on their feet, applauding, crying, celebrating before a single note was played. Samuel stopped center stage, violin in one hand, bow in the other. He looked out at the audience, a sea of faces, young and old, rich and poor, all united in that moment. He gave a deep, respectful bow. The applause intensified, echoing against the theater walls like thunder. Finally, the silence returned. Samuel walked to his position beside Augusto. The maestro looked at him and whispered, "Show the world who you are." Samuel nodded. He set the violin beneath his chin, closed his eyes, centering himself. Augusto raised the baton. The entire theater held its breath. And began. The redemption of Samuel Cardoso, Part 7, the orchestral introduction to Beethoven's Concerto in D major, burst into the hall with majestic power. It was perfect, every instrument in its place, every note crystalline. Then came Samuel's entrance. He lifted the bow and played. The first note was like the birth of a star. Pure, bright, impossible to describe. It wasn't just sound. It was emotion made audible. The audience understood instantly. People were already crying in the first bar. Samuel continued, and each note told a story. Each phrase was a life lived. 57 years of pain, love, loss, and hope flowed through the violin. In the audience, people who had never heard classical music were spellbound. Professional musicians watched in reverence. Critics forgot their notebooks, only feeling. Monica Ferreira, seated in the front row, recorded everything with tears streaming freely. This would be the story of her life. The first movement flowed like a mighty river. Samuel and the orchestra were one, breathing together, feeling together. Patricia played with everything she had, inspired by Samuel's presence. Eduardo smiled through tears. Marina was completely immersed, forgetting herself. When the first movement ended, there was half a second of absolute silence. Then spontaneous applause exploded, breaking all protocol. Augusto did not stop it. It was impossible not to applaud. The second movement was slower, more introspective. Samuel played as if speaking to Helena, telling her about his journey back. The music captured that love. People who had never known Helena felt her presence through the notes. The third movement was energetic, virtuosic. Samuel attacked it with a vitality that defied his age and his past. It was pure celebration of life, of second chances, of hope. His fingers flew across the strings at impossible speed, yet every note had soul. It wasn't empty technical display. It was life lived in real time. The orchestra accompanied him perfectly. Augusto conducted with tears in his eyes, completely lost in the music. The movement built and built, gathering energy like a wave about to break. And then the final climax. Samuel played the last phrases with body, mind, and soul. The violin sang, wept, laughed. It was human. It was divine. The final note hung in the air, vibrating, filling every corner of the theater. Silence. Deep, sacred, eternal silence. Then the theater exploded. 5,000 people on their feet, shouting, crying, applauding with wild intensity. It wasn't polite applause. It was pure celebration of something extraordinary. Bravo! 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 Samuel lowered the violin, trembling. He looked at the audience, that ocean of love and acceptance, and could scarcely breathe. Augusto stepped down from the podium and hugged Samuel tightly. "You made history," he whispered in his ear. History. The entire orchestra stood, applauding as well. Patricia wept uncontrollably. Eduardo shouted bravo. Marina had her hands to her face, sobbing. The applause continued. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. 15 minutes. No one stopped. Samuel bowed again and again, each time more moved. At last, Augusto took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice trembled, "we have just witnessed something we may never see again. Something impossible to describe." The applause subsided enough for him to go on. Samuel Cardoso reminded us why music exists. Not for technique, though his technique is perfect, but to touch souls. To remind us what it means to be human. Augusto turned to Samuel. "Would you like to say something?" Samuel took the microphone with trembling hands. His voice failed. He breathed deeply. "I spent 57 years believing I didn't deserve music, that I didn't deserve joy. The theater was in absolute silence. I lost my wife and my son in 1968, and I thought I had lost myself. I stopped playing. I stopped living." Tears ran down his face. "I lived on the streets. I was invisible, forgotten, and I thought I deserved it." Sobs could be heard in the audience. But a few days ago, I saw a girl with a cheap violin. She had passion, but no means. And I realized I was being selfish, keeping everything to myself. Samuel looked directly at the audience. "Music is not mine. It's no one's. It's a gift to be shared. And everyone deserves access to it." Applause began again. "That's why we're going to create the Helena Cardoso School of Music," Samuel said, voice breaking. For children without means. Where talent matters more than money. The theater exploded. People didn't just applaud. They shouted support, waved, celebrated. If you want to help, Samuel continued, look for Julia backstage. Every contribution will change lives. He handed back the microphone and gave one last deep bow. This time, as he exited, the audience let him go, but kept applauding until he disappeared completely. Backstage, he was engulfed in hugs. Julia, Alberto, all the musicians, everyone crying, everyone celebrating. You did it, Julia cried. It was perfect. More than perfect, Alberto corrected. It was miraculous. Ricardo came running. Samuel, social media has exploded. You're trending worldwide. And we already have 20 calls from people wanting to donate to the school. 20? Samuel could hardly believe it. And climbing. This is going to be huge. Monica Ferreira got access backstage. Thank you, she said, hugging Samuel. For coming back. For reminding us why we love music. For 2 hours, Samuel received people. Donors, fans, musicians. All wanting to thank him. Contribute. Be part of it. One man offered 50,000 raise. A woman offered a building. A businessman offered instruments. The school was becoming reality before his eyes. At last, exhausted but radiant, Samuel returned to the dressing room. Julia came in with a tablet. You need to see this, she said, eyes shining. The concert recording had 2 million views. The comments were in the thousands. I cried from beginning to end. This changed my life. The most beautiful performance I've ever seen. I never liked classical, but this is pure art. And the donations, Julia went on, have already passed 500,000 raise. Samuel had to sit down. It was too much. With that, Julia calculated, we can rent a big building, buy quality instruments, hire teachers, give full scholarships to 50 children in the first year. Samuel couldn't speak. He only cried with gratitude. Underscore 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 2 weeks later, the Helena Cardoso School of Music officially opened. 50 children were selected. All from low-income families, all with a passion for music. Samuel stood at the entrance on the first day, greeting each one personally. Welcome. What's your name? Which instrument would you like to learn? You're going to love it here. Among the children, a small girl with a battered toy violin. Samuel recognized her immediately. Sophia, he exclaimed. You came. The girl nodded shyly. You remember me? Of course. You were my inspiration. Because of you I came back. Sophia's eyes widened. Really? Really. And you know what else? You'll be my first official student. I'm going to teach you personally. Sophia's face lit up with pure joy. Samuel took her to a practice room. He picked up a new violin, the perfect size for her. This is yours now, he said, placing it in her hands. To keep, to practice, to dream. Sophia held the violin as the most precious treasure in the world. Tears ran down her cheeks. It's mine? Really? Really. And when you grow, you'll have a bigger one. You'll always have the right instrument. Sophia hugged the violin, sobbing with happiness. Samuel had to wipe his own eyes. Seeing that joy, that innocent gratitude, it was everything he had come back for. Now let's begin, he said, regaining composure. First lesson, the violin is an extension of you. It isn't wood and strings. It's your voice. In the following weeks, the school flourished. More children enrolled. More volunteers appeared. Donations kept coming. Patricia took on music theory. Eduardo, basic technique. Marina, advanced students. Bernardo coordinated performances. Alberto became the administrative director. Julia managed everything. Augusto visited to conduct student orchestras. They were a family. Chosen, not by blood, but by music and purpose. 3 months later, they gave their first public performance, a small recital in the school building. Sophia would play last. She was nervous, But Samuel calmed her. "Do you remember why you play?" "To share something beautiful," Sophia replied, repeating his words. "Exactly. Now go and shine." Sophia stepped on stage with her violin. She played a simple piece Samuel had arranged. It wasn't technically perfect. There were scratches, out-of-tune notes. But there was sincerity, pure passion that reached deep. The audience rose in a standing ovation. Sophia smiled, radiant. Samuel stepped up and hugged her. "You were wonderful. I made some mistakes. So what? You played with your heart. That's more important than 1,000 perfect notes." Sophia's mother, crying, "Thank Samuel. You have no idea what you've done for my daughter." "I do," Samuel replied softly. "I gave her the same chance someone once gave me." The redemption of Samuel Cardoso, Part 8, Epilogue. The following years were of exponential growth. The schools multiplied. 1 became 5, then 10, then 20. Samuel, now 75, continued teaching personally whenever he could. His hair was completely white. His hand showed signs of age, but his violin still sang with the same magic. Sophia, now 17, had become an exceptional violinist. She had won national competitions and was about to start music school on a full scholarship. But before that, something special was planned. It was the 10th anniversary of the first Helena Cardoso School. A commemorative concert would be held again at the Grand Harmony Municipal Theater. Samuel was in his dressing room, getting ready. Julia, now executive director of the entire school network, came in with an envelope. "This arrived for you today," she said, moved. "It's from the Music University." Samuel opened it. It was an official letter offering him an honorary doctorate in music and education, recognizing his transformative impact on the country's music education. Dr. Samuel Cardoso, Julia attested the title. "Has a nice ring to it." Samuel chuckled softly. "Titles are lovely, but they aren't what matters. What matters is them." He pointed to the monitor showing the hundreds of children and young people getting ready for the concert. Each one of those children is a title, an achievement, a victory against inequality. Patricia entered, now one of the network's leading teachers. "Samuel, there's someone here who wants to meet you." It was a young woman of about 20, holding a violin. "Mr. Cardoso, I'm Ana Paula. I studied at the Belo Horizonte School for 3 years. A pleasure, Ana Paula. I just wanted to thank you." Her voice trembled. "My family had nothing. Literally nothing. We lived on donations. Without your schools, I would never have played an instrument." She opened the violin case. Inside was a beautiful instrument, clearly expensive. "Today I'm principal violinist in the state orchestra. I have a salary. I can help my family. All because of you." Samuel embraced her, moved. "Not because of me. Because of your talent, your dedication." "But you gave me the chance," Ana Paula insisted. "You gave hope when there was none." Stories like Ana Paula's multiplied. Former students of the schools were in professional orchestras, music universities, some even teaching in the Helena Cardoso schools themselves. The circle was complete. Samuel wasn't just teaching music. He was creating a generation of educators who would carry on the legacy. The concert began. Hundreds of current and former students played together. It was a massive orchestra, filling every inch of the stage. Augusto, now 80 but still vigorous, conducted with youthful energy. The first piece was specially arranged, a combination of melodies representing Samuel's journey. It began in dark, painful tones, gradually evolving into light and hope. The audience sat in reverent silence. Many there knew the whole story, the tragedy, the lost years, the redemption. When the piece ended, the applause was immense. Then Sophia took the stage. She was no longer the shy little girl from years ago, but a confident young woman, carrying her violin as a natural extension of herself. 10 years ago, she began, her voice clear through the microphone. "I was a girl with a toy violin and an impossible dream." The audience hung on every word. "Then I met a man society had forgotten, a man the world had deemed invisible." Sophia looked toward the wings, where Samuel watched. But this man was not invisible. He was a light waiting to shine again. And when he did, he lit the path for hundreds, thousands of children like me. She held the violin with reverence. "Today I will play something special, A piece Mr. Samuel composed. He never showed it to anyone, but when he learned I would play today, he gave me the score. Samuel was surprised. He hadn't expected her to announce it publicly. This piece is called Helena and Gabriel. Sophia continued. It is dedicated to the wife and the son he lost. It is about pain transformed into love, about second chances, about legacy. She set the violin and began. The melody was at once sad and beautiful. Samuel had composed it during a sleepless night months earlier, when Helena's memories were particularly vivid. Sophia played with maturity beyond her years. Every note carried the emotion Samuel had put there. She wasn't merely performing. She was feeling, living the music. The entire theater wept. There wasn't a dry eye. When Sophia finished, there was a moment of absolute silence. Then Samuel began to applaud, alone, from the wings. Soon the entire orchestra joined. Then the audience. In seconds, there was a roaring standing ovation. Sophia bowed, tears streaming freely. Then she extended her hand to Samuel. "Come," she said into the microphone. "Please." Samuel walked slowly to the stage. His legs were no longer as strong as before, but his spirit was vibrant. When he reached center stage, Sophia hugged him tightly. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. For seeing me when no one else did. For believing when even I didn't. You made it all worthwhile," Samuel replied, his voice breaking. They parted, and Samuel turned to the audience. 20 years ago, he began, his voice still strong despite his age. I was a man without purpose, without direction, without hope. He paused, looking around the theater. I had lost everything I loved, and I thought there was no reason to go on. I was merely existing. Samuel held the violin. But then something changed. It wasn't a miracle. It wasn't magic. It was a girl with a cheap violin and eyes full of impossible dreams. He looked at Sophia. She reminded me why music matters, why it's worth fighting for, why second chances exist. Samuel turned to the entire student orchestra on stage. These children, these young people, are my legacy. Not the concerts I gave, not the prizes I won, but them. Every child who found their voice through music, every family who found hope, every dream that became reality. He raised the violin. "This will be my last public performance," he announced. Exclamations of surprise and protest rose from the audience. "No, no," Samuel calmed them with a smile. "I won't stop playing, but I will devote all my time to teaching, where I belong, where I can make the most difference." He set the violin beneath his chin one last time. "Then let me play for you one last time, not as a performance, but as a thank you, for saving me, for giving me purpose, for letting me be part of something larger than myself." Samuel closed his eyes and began. He played Bach's Chaconne, the same piece he had played that first day, when everything began. But now it held a completely different meaning. Each note was a prayer, each phrase gratitude. There was no technical display, only honest, vulnerable emotion. The theater was in complete silence, except for the music. Even breath seemed to stop. Samuel played with tears streaming down his face. He thought of Helena, of Gabriel, of Jose. He thought of every child he had taught, every life he had touched. He thought of how long and painful the road had been, but also of how every step of that journey, even the darkest, had brought him there. The last note floated in the air, gentle and eternal. Samuel held the bow, reluctant to let go. Then slowly, he lowered the violin. The silence lasted 5 seconds. 10. 15. Then the theater exploded. People didn't just applaud. They shouted, cried, jumped. It was a celebration not only of music, but of humanity, of redemption, of love, of hope. Samuel stood at center stage, taking it all in, absorbing each moment, knowing he would keep it in his memory forever. Sophia joined him, then Patricia, Eduardo, Marina, Bernardo. Soon the entire orchestra was on stage, embraced in a huge mass of bodies and emotion. Alberto came from the wings. Julia too. Augusto stepped down from the podium. Everyone wanted to be in that moment, part of that memory. The ovation went on for 20 minutes. underscore 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 10 years later, the Helena Cardoso schools reached the mark of 100 units. More than 50,000 children had received free music education. Former students of the schools were in professional orchestras around the world. Some became renowned soloists, others teachers. Others still brought music to their communities in unique, creative ways. But all of them, without exception, carried something of Samuel, his philosophy, his kindness, his unshakable belief that music is a right, not a privilege. Sophia, now 32, had turned down every offer from professional orchestras. She returned as artistic director of the original school. She knew where she belonged. She knew her purpose. On the 20th anniversary of the first school, they held a massive concert. More than 1,000 musicians played together, all students or alumni of the Helena Cardoso schools. Sophia stood on stage as guest conductor. Before beginning, she addressed the audience. 20 years ago, a man came to this theater. He had nothing but a violin and a dream. Society had forgotten him. The world had deemed him invisible. Her voice rang clear and strong. But he wasn't invisible. He was simply waiting for the right moment. And when that moment came, he transformed pain into purpose, loss into legacy, despair into hope. Sophia looked at the musicians
around her. All of us here are proof that second chances exist, that it is never too late to begin again, that a single act of kindness can change thousands of lives. She raised the baton. This is dedicated to Samuel Cardoso, maestro, teacher, inspiration. May his legacy continue to touch hearts for generations. And then they began. The music was a new composition, created collaboratively by alumni, based on the theme Samuel used to play. It was at once sad and joyful, melancholic and hopeful. It was perfect. As the music filled the theater, something magical happened. People in the audience closed their eyes and felt Samuel there. Not physically, but in spirit, in the music, in the love, in the notes. Because legacies do not die. They multiply. They spread. They live through those who carry the torch. And the legacy of Samuel Cardoso, of humility, compassion, second chances, and the transformative power of music, would keep shining. Now and always, the music reached its climax. 1,000 instruments in perfect harmony. And then, softly, the last note. Silence. Then joy.